everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Peter Panagore. And I have been so excited about this show. I've been actually excited for weeks once we scheduled this. Yeah. Because I just love how articulate you are about the unseen, and how comfortable you are communicating about it so that other people can feel it. Because even if the words don't hit, the heart space hits. Mm-hmm. So first what I wanted to ask you, so Peter is a reverend, and he actually was on TV. He was a TV and radio personality. How did you have the guts to do that?
I trusted in the spirit and the strength within me to be able to provide for me what I needed in order to do this job that I had no idea how to do.
So do you want to start there? Because I think so much of what's happening right now, if people could get to a place where they could trust and just say yes, that we'd be turning this ship around a lot faster. So could you talk about that first?
Sure. There's this little tiny book called First You Have to Row a Little Boat.
Oh. Okay.
So in order to turn the ship of society around, we all have to row our own little boat, and we have to turn our own little boat. And that's the history of mysticism. Globally. This is not my thing. It's every individual mystic who's ever lived has learned some way or been turned, one or the other. Either happens to you or you help make it happen, or both. But the little tiny boat of your soul needs to turn. But there's so many boats in the water right now. There are tens of millions of boats in the water that have never been in the water before in the history of the world. And everybody's out there, rowing their little boat all over the world. Hundreds of millions and near-death experiencers. Primarily, I'm talking about by the tens of millions brought back to life through science. But, so here's the other thing, is that this is not a new phenomenon. People have had their little boat inside themselves. Hundreds of millions of us are aware that you have a boat. And maybe you were born aware of this little cradle craft that you had, or maybe you kind of suddenly found yourselves sinking when you were 7 and somebody pulled you up into your own boat. However it happened. There's lots of us. I'm a natural born mystic. You may see me as a near-death experiencer, which is totally true, but near-death experience is a component of a much larger group of people, and that much larger group of people goes all around the world and back in history, and we're mystics, where people have had mystical experiences. And I kind of came into the world this way, and I think I know, because I'm talking to people all over the world all the time who came into the world this way. They're contacting me. I've set up like this network to have conversations with people who have had a near-death-like experience but never died. And those are the sort of the higher end natural born people. But there are lots of other people who've had other kinds of mystical experiences, like you. And I use this example all the time because it's very common. Okay. A deceased loved one comes to visit you sometime in the first year. And IANS studies this. There's some study going on around this. I remember hearing there's a window of around death where the preponderance of visitations occur within a year, right? And I can't cite it, but I've read this. And I like to cite my sources, but I can't right now. So anyway, in any case, what I'm trying to say is that there is a global phenomenon going on, but it's enhanced now because of near-death experience, because we're talking about it. Okay, so we woo-woo people, we kooky people. I kept my secret for most of my career because I did not want to be misperceived. I did not want to be judged and have the door closed in my face, and could then never communicate what I was trying to communicate. And for those of you who know me, or for those of you who are getting to know me, I speak mysticism with a Christian accent. I'm from Boston, but you would never know that. I don't have a Boston accent, but I do have a Christian accent.
Right.
But it's not my mother tongue. It's the accent of the culture in which I live in order to, A, find a way for myself to understand what happened to me, or what happened to me in a series of things that led up to my first near-death experience, all these other out-of-body mystical experiences I had since I was a child, and contextualize that and give it a bit of a framework so I could think about it. But here's the thing that you pointed to. It's not the words of any of these structures. It's the communication of the thing itself. It's when it's these people, and I point to my shelves back here, mystics from around the world. And this week I'm reading a little bit of Yogananda, and I got a little bit of Patanjali, and I got Kabir over here. So I kind of shift around inside all these different structures. But it's never about the language for any of them. It's never, the language is a mechanism for the knowledge, but not the thing itself. And all of them talk about the ineffable and the nothingness of being. Atheists are believing that there's nothing when they die, and they're right. Because there is no thingness to it. And this no thingness is what many near-death experiencers experience, but it's also every single time you touch the divine, or the divine touches you, it's this energetic, and there's lots of language for it, this energetic flow, this frequency vibration, this language that's better for it than other language, like that, energy flow, but all of it's metaphorical, and none of it is the thing itself. And you can open yourself up to this presence. You can carve away your inner life and carve away your false self and your egoic nature. But that's not to say you lose your ego, because you got to have an ego to live in the world. It's that you lose your false self, this misconception that you are actually what you think you are.
Right.
And it's an unknowing. It's a nothing and an unknowing. And there are practices that last a lifetime that carve away layer by layer, veil by veil, to create a space inside yourself that also radiates outside yourself and then can flow through yourself. And the thing of it is, for me, and I'm just speaking for me, is that for me, the more I get out of the way, the more capacity I have, the more I become myself. And so instead of trying to fit this infinite purity into this finite impurity, I just try to get out of the way. It's just, and I'll stop here for a minute. Let's get a word in edgewise. I'll start with this famous quote on Mount Athos: "If you die before you die, then when you die, you do not die." And that's the point of these practices.
Okay, so your first book that you wrote is called Heaven is Beautiful.
No, it's a second book.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's I happen to have it here on my shelf.
Okay, good.
It's easy read. So it's 2 Minutes for God. This is from my TV show.
Oh.
So I had a TV show for 15 years. I inherited it. I was the fifth minister. It was non-denominational, which basically in my time meant interfaith, and including atheists and agnostics. And I know this because my audience was the morning TV news audience. I was in the middle of the TV news just before the weather for 2 minutes every morning for 15 years. But it's been going on by the time it closed at the end of my 15 years, it had been on the air for 91 years.
Wow.
So it was a cultural institution in the state of Maine and New Hampshire. And so we reached between 80 and 100,000 people a day. It wasn't a new eyeballs. It was the loyal watchers of News Center Maine, and they were hugely wonderful partners. And when I was there in a nonprofit, sort of sistered with them, I wrote 1,700. I didn't produce. Yes, I did. I was a producer. I wasn't the executive producer or the director, but I was the writer, and that was I get to say I was a producer because I was a writer. I wrote 1,700 of these. So they are 2-minute stories that all begin with hopefully an engaging first sentence and end with a prayer and a thought for the day. And I had 2 minutes every day to tell one of these. And so this became a Maine bestseller. And it's a 365 day devotional. But other than the particular holidays, because I was required to, give something special for Memorial Day and Labor Day and all this stuff, which is great. And I had worked with this incredibly wonderful crew. Okay, I loved these people. This is the most fun I had in my career, was working with the same crew every day for 15 years. And we were funny and we had fun. And I was always barefoot in the station. I wore shorts, not in the winter, but I wore shorts and bare feet, and nobody cared. It's like, whatever, as long as you look good up for the camera up above. Anyway, so I did that for 15 years. I got recruited into that. I was a Congregational United Church of Christ minister. I was a mystic and a near-death experiencer, hiding out in a denomination, living a life of service out of love among communities, not just working in the church, but in the wider community where I lived in. It was quite exciting. It was dramatic. I had a very dramatic life in this kind of thing. So then I got recruited into TV, and FM had an FM show that was 2 minutes daily and half an hour on Sundays, where I got to explore spiritual music of all these different genres. That was my shtick. Spiritual music could have been folk, country, rock, rap, new age. It was everything, but the theme was spirituality, and that was fun.
So how did you get inspired for each one of those? Did you wait for a book to fall off the shelf, or?
No, I learned to go hunting for stories. I was an English major, so storytelling is, and I studied storytelling. I've been a writer my whole life. I've been studying storytelling, but so I know I hunt for stories. I pay attention. I just observe. I would take notes. Oh, that's a good idea. And then I would sit down and I would have this single little tiny idea, and I'd be like, okay, I've got to have 5 done by Friday. So I just start writing. So I just like take this idea and I would just start to write it. And it would flow and develop, and they were all undergirded because I was still trying to bridge this gap between spirituality and secularism, but also trying to satisfy those who wanted me to be more biblical. Because I was, pretty much everything had a scriptural reference to it that was never mentioned on TV. I figured I played softball instead of hardball. And I wrote them all in such a way that they were super inclusive. So it was never Christian at all in presentation. It was only spiritual inside its presence.
So I was a member of the First Congregational Church here in Boulder with Bruce McKenzie. Do you recognize that name?
Oh, yeah.
He wore funny ties.
What did you say?
He always wore funny ties. In fact, he could have gotten an ugly tie contest winner every year. But I loved being part of this congregation because I'm in a college town. And I think they said 78% of the congregation had postgraduate degrees. So there was, when he didn't use biblical text at all, I would end up writing down names of books that he quoted from every Sunday, because it was fascinating. It was so, that's why I think I love what you do, is that I want to touch the mystical. I want words for it. I want paths to it. And so it isn't, so it's part philosophy, I think, is what happens. It's not, the mystic presence is kind of a philosophy of life.
Yes. And it's funny you picked that up, because I don't think most people see that, except for my brother. My brother, who has one of his many degrees, is in philosophy, and he's one of the people that I can talk to about this.
Yes.
Even though he hasn't experienced it the way that I have, he has a structure in his head because of philosophical reading, which he still does, and he still reads it. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, Kathy. That's a rare thing to hear.
Right. Well, so I had a spiritually transformative experience. I haven't had a near-death experience that I know of, although when I was 2 weeks old, a bunch of babies died of influenza in Cincinnati, where I grew up, and I made it. So I don't know, who knows?
Right.
But
You could have almost died. You could have crossed over, and you're the one of the babies that came back.
I don't know, but I already knew, I remember at 8 going out in the backyard and saying, "You left me at the wrong house, come and get me." I don't know what happened that caused me to do that. I haven't gone back to figure that out. But I knew that I heard things and saw things that no one else saw. And by 8, I was really secure in it. And I knew I better not talk about it because they'd put me on drugs or put me away.
Yeah. I was the same way, Kathy.
Oh.
So I had by the time I was 6, I'd had 2 out-of-body heaven experiences that after the first one, I learned to shut my mouth. And then I kept my mouth. That's one of the reasons why I was so ready to shut my mouth when my NDE came, because I had long practice of knowing when people think you're nuts.
Well, did you get superpowers though?
Superpowers. I got wisdom. I got understanding. I got compassion. I got relationship. I got a lot of them. I had some. By the time I was in college, by the year before I died, I had 5 and 6, and I can exclude, these are just the major ones: 5 and 6, high school, and 2 the winter before I died, and there were other little ones kind of woven in there, appearances of had this divine being was in my closet when I was a kid, but that kind of stuff. I learned because of that nobody believed me, and I was better off keeping my lips zipped.
Well,
Go ahead.
That's what I think that is fascinating about the near-death experiencers. Many of them say that they didn't tell anybody for 15 to 30 years. And then all of a sudden it was safe to come out and process. And they had other people that would help them. Like Diane Cochran was a nurse in the Vietnam War. When she saw the young man have a near-death experience as a patient. And then she had this compassionate experience of seeing what he was going through and knew that it was real. So that's what's so fascinating, is that was 40 years ago. Right. And now Dr. Raymond Moody's work is well known, but back then it was only a handful of people that even had a name for it.
Yeah. And there's some in the Bible. They were so noticeable that they got recorded in the Bible.
Oh.
So in the Hebrew texts, I think it's Elisha raises a widow's son, and for one. And then a couple times after Jesus dies, some of his apostles, there's a couple of raisings, and then of course he does. And of course, I mean, he raises Lazarus and this little girl, according to the stories. Okay, I don't want people to go down the wrong route here. I'm going to stop and say that I take a mythological, historical, critical, analytical approach to historical texts. So this is not literalism. There's a lot of thinking behind this. Anyway, just throwing that out there, metaphor. in any case, a story doesn't have to be true to tell the truth. And so there's a bunch of these near-death experiences that are recorded in the Bible. And someone pointed out to me the other day that they think that and I think she said it was Julia in Norwich, may have had a near-death experience, but I don't remember seeing that in the text. But maybe I need to look at it with new eyes. But for the most part, most of the historical saints Kabir, Hafez, Rumi, Julian, they didn't have near-death experiences. They had direct mystical experiences of a type that proved the rule.
So what is the criteria that you use to define a mystical experience?
There are several different selections, and I've selected William James because of the varieties of the religious experience that he wrote. He was the father, the grandfather of psychology in America. As my brother, the brilliant man, says, he may be the smartest man of the 21st century, of the 20th century. That people don't quite know that he was as smart as he was. So anyway, he has 4 criteria, and the varieties, I have it right here because I keep it at hand. You may have read this. If you studied religion in college, you probably read this book, The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. And in it, this is turn of the last century. He has 4 characteristics, and I paraphrase. Mystical experiences are transient. They have a beginning and an end. They're passive. You don't make them happen. Now, there's an exception to this. They're passive. You don't make them happen. They happen to you. They are noetic. They leave you with knowledge inside your soul that is ineffable. So there's in this noetic, what he calls noetic, or others call noetic knowledge. I think that the scriptures call that wisdom with a capital W. It's this thing that lodges when a mystical experience happens to you second. It happens to your soul first, to your consciousness first, because this is there's this great rabbinic idea that the soul, the body is a shoe for the soul. And so instead of seeing the whole soul stuffed into a shoe, what you instead see is just a foot of the soul in the shoe. The body is that small.
Yeah.
You are mostly outside of yourself. Yes. And so when a divine experience happens, it happens to your higher self, and then it comes through that into through the atoms of the layers to get atomized and into your body where you experience it in a form that's helpful to you. So your great Aunt Jo comes to tell you that she loved you when she's dead, and she comes in her best, clothes at her best age for you, not just for her, but for you. So that and exudes love that isn't hers. So the love that is exuded is from from her higher self too. And so there's all this focus through the veil itself that gets expressed in all these different languages. That's why everybody talks about this differently. You get the Upanishads and Krishna, and you get Yogananda, and you get Jesus, and everybody's trying to figure out how to say this thing because it's only metaphor, because it's ineffable. So you get these 4 things. You get transient, passive, wisdom, and ineffability. And those are the four criteria into which near-death experience fits, along with all these other kinds of mystical experiences. And it took me quite a while to understand this, because I had been a mystic when I was younger, and my near-death experience was so far beyond anything that had ever happened to me before, even though they were pretty far out. When I start talking about those things, you'll understand what I mean. But nothing compared to not being connected to the body and being in the oneness of being, period.
Well, I just as a side note for everyone, aren't you working on a screenplay and a book about your pre-mystical experiences?
The book's been put in delay for 1.5 years almost, as I work on this movie. For Heaven is Beautiful, sold it, optioned for a film with 2 Hollywood producers that have a very large, nice pedigree. They've had a lot of success in their movie building career over their lifetime. And so I'm honored to be with them. And they've been working with me. We've been working on, because the book is, the way they described it is, and this is another education. My whole career has been about learning new things.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was a techie until I went to work in the TV station. Now, I'm a techie. I can do that stuff. Well, look at that. And so now I'm learning about writing, and I'm always writing in new forms. I'm learning about film. And so films have first, second, and third act. the book that they're optioning is second act. They want some first act that will be woven in so that it can create connection to my life, so it doesn't start starkly on the cliffside.
I see.
And they want to continue it on a little after, and leave it with a cliffhanger, which was true. It's all going to be true stories. It's just going to be put in a movie form.
So you're having to recall these early days. Are you doing hypnotherapy or some process to remember it?
No, I've spent most of my life pondering these particular events over all the time. So they're like always, even though I'm not talking about them, they're all, I'm like, oh, what's going on?
Wow.
And because the thing about, so the first experience that I had, I was 5 years old, and I got pulled out of myself and brought inside of my angel, to lack of another term, this intelligence, this all-powerful intelligence, took me from my body, and brought me into the divine presence, and in the void. Only I was in a bubble inside of this void, and I had this interaction. But inside of this interaction, I knew that I wasn't the little boy down there in the tree. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not me. This is me. Even though I had sort of that astral body form, because I was still connected. I've traveled up and down what they call the silver cord a whole bunch of times, but I haven't initiated it. I'm not making this happen. I try to peel away the layers of myself to make myself available for the divine will with a capital W, and to let it have its way with me. Because that's what they all say. This is what they all say, get out of the way.
Right. So, but now, do you ever try to walk into that angel? Do you ever try
to always only do one thing? It's pretty freaking boring, I'll tell you, for people talking to me, because I only have one intention ever. My singular intention is the divine self itself. It's really everything that I want is a manifestation of my ego spiritually. So instead of wait a minute, I've got a Kabir poem for you that will help explain this.
Okay.
All right. So I read this morning in my meditation group. Okay. So this is Kabir. Friend, please tell me what I can do about this world. I hold to it and keep spinning out. I gave up sewn clothes and wore a robe, but I noticed one day the cloth was well woven. So I bought some burlap, but I still throw it elegantly over my left shoulder. I pulled back on my sexual longings, and now I discover that I'm angry a lot. I gave up rage, and now I notice that I am greedy all day. I work hard at dissolving the greed, and now I am proud of myself. When the mind wants to break its link with the world, it still holds on to one thing. Kabir says, listen, my friend, there are very few that find the path. And the idea here is that I could try to direct my spiritual life. I could try to strip away the aspects of myself that are uncomfortable, my anger, my sadness, or I could cover them all in the one thing. And that's why I pursue the one thing. If people want to find their angels, that's helpful to them. If people want to learn to travel astrally, that's helpful for them, because they understand then that their consciousness is not attached to their bodies, but it's still related to the egoic mind. It's still related to the material world. And because its orientation of a spiritual direction is into here as opposed to out of here. And the crazy thing is that when you aim yourself out of here, that's when you get all this stuff that is here. Right. It's this let it go to get it thing.
Right. But again, I think every time that we've talked, trust comes up for me, of how you learn to trust that. And know
practice,
because when you let go of everything, You know, that's why there are these processes, the meditation process, or, you know, the step by step, is so that, or the breathing, whatever it is, that you get to into the void with faith and trust.
Yes, and I had a hard time with it. Okay, so where you see me today is not where I was on my path. So before I died, the year before I died, I went, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get to where we're going, but to understand what I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you what happened.
Okay.
So the year before I died, I was backpacking on the Appalachian Trail, and the same spring break the year before, and I was with a buddy, a new buddy who we've been backpacking a few times, who's still my friend, by the way, and he's an atheist. And anyway, we were backpacking on the Appalachian Trail in Massachusetts, 8 inches of snow, and middle of the week, one night, I'm in the half cabin, and I have these two dreams, and I'm just going to tell you one of them.
Okay.
These two dreams are unlike other dreams because it's not a vivid dream. I get taken out of myself. So I fall asleep. This angel who had collected me before in my life comes and yanks me out of my body and pulls me up. Like it's like an elevator chute, a silver elevator chute. But as I'm going up, it's got a glass floor, and I can see myself, and I can see the roof of the cabin, and I can see, you know, the treetops, and I'm carried up to the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. And at that point, I enter into a dark void. So I'm inside of the dark void, and I'm contained inside this angelic energy. This ball is a bubble in which I am, and I see myself inside there from outside. My astral body is in there, but I see myself, but I'm also looking out of my own eyes simultaneously, and I can see where I came from. So I've got this whole thing going on, but my attention is not down on Earth. My attention is exactly where I am. And so I'm watching this, and when this column of fire erupts inside my bubble, and it erupts from inside me and extends below me and outside my bubble on the top and the bottom, and it's a column of fire, and I'm on fire. I'm on fire on the inside, and it's radiant like a tube, a tunnel of fire roaring up from me and around me. And the voice without sound says to me, "You will not be consumed." And I'm back to the earth. And so I've had a hard time believing that. Okay. Because when I chose to come back to life, I chose a willful path. I mean, I was given this choice of any of these paths I could enter into, and I wanted some autonomy. I wanted some selflessness, some self left, because I could have chosen no self. It was right there in front of me. But I'm like, I'm not ready for that. So I choose some selfness, and then I discover what this thing I agreed to really is, and I'm upset about it because I didn't understand the deal that I was making when I made it. And I ran from it.
Oh.
But I found out there was nowhere I could go that it wasn't there. And so even while I'm running from it, I'm still continuing my meditative life. I'm still feeding myself, even though I'm in this wrestling match with it. I wrestle with it. And the thing that I did not want to do was be consumed. I did not want to die to myself. Even though the natural result of a meditative, centering, silent practice, mindfulness works the same way. I can't speak to others because I don't know them. But the practice of silence, whether you will it or not, strips away the will of the self, right? Because the practice does that. And so even while I struggled with this, I had been given the tools that I needed in order to pursue it in my struggle. And so years and years and years of decades of stripping this self and not wanting to be consumed, that was my struggle until I died again. So the second time I died, that kind of just went away. And it's just like, okay,
you win.
All right. I'm all in now. It's like I've got a big pile of chips. I'm like, I'm all in, and
So how could other people get all in? That's why I wanted to
Same
ask.
process. So I can talk about that.
Yeah, because I really think that's what this time is affording us. Before I got on this call with you, I was on with a friend, and she's going on and on about the drama in her family, and I kept on saying, look at it from the higher perspective. Go talk to their heart. Go connect to your heart and talk to them with your heart. From that level, don't stay in this play. Go and have a conversation at the higher level. And she went, oh, thank you so much. I mean, people don't realize when you're in this day-to-day play that there's all different ways to exist in it.
Yes, and they're wonderful. That's how I functioned in the church for all those years that I didn't. So here I was preaching in the pulpit every week, but I never talked about the truth of what I knew.
Right. Well,
not directly.
Understand it either.
No, and so it was all about the indirect, and it was all about what you're saying. You can, if you bring yourself into the place of the higher consciousness inside yourself, you get to dispense that in the world. And if you practice every single day, I only do 20 minutes of meditation in the day. Not an hour, not 2 hours. 20 minutes is like I could do that in my busy life.
Yeah.
And so I create an increasingly large space of peace inside myself. I create a space for peace inside myself, and then I get to rest in that peace, even when it doesn't eliminate my emotions. I have what melancholia might have been called a century and a half ago. My near-death experience, all the trauma that I had. Anybody who's had trauma might have some depression. I've had some depression in my life. It doesn't eliminate that stuff,
right?
But it creates this place to stand underneath it. And so because of my physical body, I know that my physical body is not myself. I choose to stand in the truth of who I actually am, and find that when I do that, it influences the world around me and my world. And the tried and true way to do this is the incremental way of meditation, but not over a week or a month. It's a lifetime thing. And I'm sorry that it's true, but it's a lifetime discipline. And what happens is that you never backslide with it. You never regain the self you lost because it's gone. So it's always, the divine is the only thing that gives an increase. Every other thing in the world takes. I get this pencil, it's going to be shorter the next time I put it in the grinder and give it a point. Everything in the world is like that, except for divine love, which is this abundance that's available, that the more we strip away of ourselves, the more presence it becomes for us. And we do that through a practice of meditation and in community. And here's the other thing about it, is that it's a multiplier. It's like, it's not my little candle and your little candle. It's when our two little candles come together, there's a third candle. So the whole thing is 3 times bigger than it would be if we were separate. And that multiplication, that magnification thing, I'm trying to, all my life, I've meditated alone because I've had to. I didn't have any community. So, but now I've got this community on YouTube, and we're meditating together, and the people have these experiences that I have had previously in my life when I was meditating in groups, on meditation retreats or in the monastery. There's this energetic accumulation that occurs in the collective.
Yes. And
it deepens everybody else's meditation and accelerates your progress. That's what that means. And it also, that's it. It deepens your progress. It deepens yourself. And then you get to carry this belly full of peace with you through the day and bring it to your daily life. This is not, you don't need, I'm trying to remember, it might have been St. Francis, always preach the gospel, but only sometimes use words. You can bring the light without ever talking about it. And actually, that's the only way it ever really gets conveyed.
That's right. That's perfect. So this online meditation, I know you're doing unchurched,
Not, I'm calling it not church because
Sorry, unchurched.
that's okay. That's okay. I went to the negative theology language because there's this theological language about the divine, which is called negative theology, because nothing you say about God is true.
Oh, okay. So, oh, God.
Sorry, theological joke. Sorry.
Okay. Well, because how could you even have that's why I'm saying once you've touched this other field of divine love and see how when you use the analogy of that you're the foot in the shoe, I when I saw it, I was like an ant in this huge spotlight, and the spotlight was me. And so from that was 17 years ago. I've been 16, 17 years ago, I've been trying to pull that more of that light into this vessel for all these years. But there is a longing about it. There is this, like when you read Rumi, it's like, I get it. I get that. And do you find that you're when you can get to that space, you're out of the longing?
When I'm raptured, for lack of a better term, then yes. And when I'm in the moment of silence inside my meditation, yes. But the moment that I become aware that I'm aware, then no, it ends. And
I understand.
But none of the fullness that's not really true. I've had experiences of no self. What here in this world, I had a major experience of no self, and so yes, even while I'm still in the world, but it's this crazy thing about mysticism is that when you reach to the place of divine union, you're not actually there because there is no more self left.
Right.
So because there's no more self left, there's no identity with it. It's this if you're still living with the paradigm of enlightened, not enlightened, then you're still in the world.
Right.
And because it is everything there is, it's like everywhere all the time. And the more you dive inside yourself, meditation is the tool. However, whether you're practicing Qigong or Tai Chi or Zazen or whatever you're doing to stop your mind from thinking, to stop the story you tell yourself and to find that silence, that's how you find your way home. Okay, so that's one way. And then there's the rapture thingy, God plucks you or sticks a finger inside you. Or there's also what Johns Hopkins University has been studying for, and other universities having to do with psilocybin and LSD. And the Johns Hopkins study is 10 years old. Over 10 years. I know a guy who's in it, another clergy person that I know. It was of rabbis and monks and ministers who'd never had mystical experiences. They gave them heroic doses in a clinical setting with a year of psychological tests ahead of time, serious science. Okay, this is like not slipshod. And they brought them to the state of the end of duality. And so when this guy came to me 2-3 years ago now, and he said, I was in the Johns Hopkins study. I'm like, oh, tell me about it. So he tells me about it and he finishes. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. He said, read the books. So I started this 2-year-long study. And I didn't tell him at the time that I had had a similar experience when I was in high school. I took too much mescaline. A triple dose, and I had a divine experience, which actually led me into becoming a meditator. It just all kind of fit together. But I discarded that experience after I died. I was like, okay, those things that happened to me when I was a kid, oh yeah, for sure those. But this thing that was induced I'm not so sure. I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind because this evidence is showing that it ends duality for people and brings them into union. And my buddy, he's in a doctoral program now writing his dissertation on this subject. It has so changed his life permanently.
Right.
And like all people, well, and like any, and like, how do I say this and be polite? If you want to maintain your spiritual experience of mysticism, however it came to you, you have to meditate. You don't meditate, you can't cultivate. You got to cultivate this thing if you want it. If this is what you want, you have to cultivate it. It might otherwise fade a little to you.
Right. Well, it's like the people that do ayahuasca or do these events, and it's almost like a badge of courage rather than a reconnect. This is all about, and this time period, I believe, is all about us reconnecting to who we really are, so that we can create heaven on earth. This experiment is changing, correct?
Yes, and I 100% agree with you. These are not party drugs, and they're not about bravery. It's about the loss of self. It's the end of duality and the beginning of oneness. And you don't have to do it 100 times. You only need a mystical experience once. That's all you need. That's all anybody needs. But yes, this whole channeling of peace, this whole emptying of self brings heaven here now. And there's hundreds of millions of us. Hundreds of millions of us. And if you don't believe me, think about the number of near-death experiencers in the United States alone, or in Canada alone. We're everywhere, and we're of all types. And the good news is that because we're speaking, everybody else gets to talk too.
Right. Well, the thing is also that once you start reading these books and you hear people talk, and you start to, if you can open your heart and listen, you actually get an upliftment. This is like having multiple amazing Sunday sermons over and over and over again, where it touches you, because this is all about remembering who you really are and showing up as the divine being that you really are, and not being, that's why I asked about trust and not being afraid, because that fear and trust are the two things. They're the opposite, but that's what's holding us back, is us trusting that this is our path of evolution, because we're on the cusp. This is happening right now.
I see what you're saying. I find that trust comes out of the silence. Yes. And that's true. So the deeper you go inside yourself, the quieter you become. Cumulatively, the more you trust the truth of what already is inside you. Because it's not like you have to.
Thank you.
It's not like it's new. It's actually you. And it's more of a remembering than it is a new knowing. And the silence, it opens that door. That's
wonderful. But I do want people to know how we're going to talk a little bit about the Ions event next, but I do want people to know that they can experience you on Sunday mornings, and also this other meditation event. Are you doing that as a public show up?
Public service.
Wow, cool. So tell us a little bit about how people could join that.
On Mondays and Wednesdays, it's live at 8 a.m. Eastern at Not Church. And we're all over the world. We have people from Africa and Asia and just everywhere, both ends of Africa. Anyway, so 8 o'clock live on YouTube, 8 p.m. Eastern. And on Tuesdays at peterpanagore.live, you can find a link for a Zoom. We have a Zoom group that meets on Tuesdays. We're a small group, maybe 5 or 6 people. It's interactive. We meditate together. We read a little something or other, somebody or other, and we talk about it, and then we meditate, and we move on. And that's also kind of what we do on Mondays and Wednesdays, but Tuesdays are more interactive. And you can find that at peterpanagore.love, and Sunday morning at 10 a.m. is Not Church. And join us afterwards for a live Zoom conversation about mysticism. My goal in all this is to try to give mystics voice.
It's perfect. But and again, I think it's not just voice, it's language, because I don't have words. When I go to that space, I don't have, I mean, the words reduce it so much for me that I don't. So that's why I just love listening to you, because you give me words that feel right. They feel like they have the frequency that I want to convey, that I don't know how to convey without listening to you.
But you know how to feel it.
Yes, I definitely know how to feel it.
And when I was on TV, when I was in the pulpit, I had this experience once where someone said to me, "My God, Peter, you look like a column of fire when you were talking this morning." I was like, "Mary, oh, thanks." But then when I got on camera, I realized that I could, through my practice, I practice a lot of Kriya Yoga, and through my throat chakra and my words and my eyes, I could project it to the lens by getting out of the way. And so I learned that it can be woven into words. And then I understood that it can be woven into paint and into bread and into carpentry. It can be woven into anything that you do, that you bring the divine self to. It can be it's not like I put it in the pencil and it stays there. I don't understand that part of it. I just know that I can convey it to people. And because, not because of me, but because it conveys itself.
Right.
And the receiver and the antenna are the same frequency.
That's right.
And so it's the more of us that become light, the more light there is in the world, the brighter it becomes for all of us, the quicker all this happens. And this could be a week, it could be a century, because it's not just the light itself. The light is still in the world, and there are still egos in the world, and there's still war in the world. And so we're also talking about the ending of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Right now, what's going on in Afghanistan, the story of the Taliban includes a different creation story and a different resolution story than Western Christendom. And these stories conflict. But what if the stories are wrong?
Right.
And so we need to, this is a sort of thing that gets cultivated among the people and becomes a tidal wave of light that's irresistible, because you know that in Afghanistan there are people like us, because we are everywhere in the world. There's nowhere that we're not.
Right. Well, again, that's where the opportunity is to send love and peace and light there. There's been all sorts of meditations that have been done when there was a lot of war. The Holy Land was in total conflict, and then there were meditations, and then there was peace for a certain amount of time. If we band together, we can make a difference and affect this reality. And that's what it sounds like. What you're doing is you're working on peace with your meditation group and with the non-church.
We become peace.
Yes.
And when we become peace, and that doesn't mean that you don't respond to people who cut you off in traffic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the depth of the soul itself, where the light leaks through effortlessly. And if enough of us get to that place and open ourselves up, we become unstoppable.
Right. Well, we turn this boat around. That's it.
We do. There you go.
Started. That's
now.
Well, and the opportunity is to come jump on with us. And part of the way that Peter's doing, besides all of this incredible gift, your generosity is amazing what you do. He's also a keynote speaker at the IONS conference that's September 1st through the 5th online this year. And Peter's, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing? Because you may be also speaking, and you've got a keynote.
I'm speaking. I'm not even sure when because I haven't looked at the calendar. It's in my calendar. I know it is.
You gotta go look at the schedule.
The calendar. But I'll be talking about the Great Global Awakening, and that's what I'll be doing. And I'll be introducing Marjorie Willicott. It's my honor to introduce Marjorie, and so I'll be doing those two things. And I look forward to hearing some of the science talks.
Right. Well, the thing that's wonderful about this science event is it's a 40-year anniversary, and there's going to be people like Raymond Moody and PMH Atwater, people that have spent their life working on this as researchers that get it. They get the joy and the love of all of this. It's not... they may not have had experiences, but they understand the experience and can validate it. I'm trying to think of the other, let's see, we've got Aben Alexander, Bruce Grayson, who just published his book, and he has a process, I guess it's a 60-page process that he collects data on when he does the research for near-death experiences. So, I mean, when you look at this, this is 40 years of incredible devotion to this, that it just opens your heart even more that these people wanted the mystic to be seen and to be used.
Yes, exactly, and they're willing to put their careers on the line to do it.
That's right. That's right. So to go to that, it's virtualconference.ions.org, and I'll have that also in the comments and in the information for everybody. And Peter, again, we hope that we get to talk to you. I mean, there's lots of comments going through on the line, and I just love what you're doing, and I appreciate you so much. And I guess we'll see if he comes back in a second. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here and for being part of all of this. You can find Peter Panagore at peterpanagore.love, which of course is so appropriate for him. And then if you could join us in the virtual conference at IONS, there we go. You can join us. Little excitement here for me. Virtualconference.ions.org. And Peter, what else would you like to tell everyone?
Don't click the upper right-hand screen. So
what that does.
I also do counseling. So I've got a global clientele of people who have mystical experiences, primarily but not exclusively, who want to process with me. But I also do end-of-life care. So I do some of that too, and grief counseling. So all that stuff is going on at peterpanagore.love. But here's the bottom line for me. Love is the treasure of life, and it's the treasure of heaven. And if you've never had a mystical experience, don't worry about it. You don't need one. You just got to love people. And if you've never loved anybody, I bet you have. If you think you never did, I bet you do. Somebody somewhere.
And
that's all. Little tiny bit.
It's all about remembering, and Peter can help you remember who you really are at a level that's high functioning in the world. You don't have to be living in a cave up on the top of a mountain. You can actually be present in doing service, like you can see all the service Peter does, and bring the light to that, because that's what we came here to do. So thank you so much. Bless you. Thank you so much. I love this. I knew I would. Thank you again. Gosh, I loved it. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Yeah. Bye. Please come and learn more from Peter.